hope you had a good break and hope you had a chance to look at our exhibition areas on the second floor. In this morning's session, we have had very interesting sessions, but in the afternoon sessions, no less exciting. We will explore potentials of future payment and digital identity.
Yeah, and now let's get into the next session. The topic is, are we ready for payments of the future? Again, the Bank of Thailand co-hosted with Thai Bankers Association and Payment System Office. And the moderator for this session, once again, Mr. Daniel Wu, Head of Public Policy Financial Services Asia Pacific Amazon Web Services. So once again, let me pass on the microphone to you, Daniel. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome all the honorable guest speakers and moderator on the stage.
Good afternoon. My name is Daniel Wu. I'm the Head of Public Policy for Financial Services covering Asia Pacific at Amazon Web Services. Today, I have the privilege to be the moderator of today's panel, and thank you once again to the Bank of Thailand, the Thai Bankers Association, and the Payment Systems Office to convene this stellar cast of leaders and builders who are helping us pave the groundwork for payments of the future. And in that vein, it's my privilege to introduce our panelists for today. We have Mr. Yoon Sok Chang, who is Executive Vice President, Market Development, Asia Pacific at MasterCard. Mr. Paul Harapin, who is Head of Revenue and Growth, Asia Pacific and Japan at Stripe. And Kun Dechapon Lambilai, who's Chief Strategy Officer at InnovestX. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. For today's session, we're going to be focusing on the infrastructure layer, followed by how it cascades and amplifies throughout the ecosystem and what it means for endpoint users like consumers and businesses. And then we'll follow it up with exciting stargazing a little bit on what are some of the fundamental shakers that will transform the way that we pay and be paid. So to kick us off, gentlemen, I don't think the audience might know the extent and breadth to which you guys are each involved in the payments industry. So may I take the opportunity to invite each of you to introduce yourselves, how you engage in the future of payments, and then we'll get us warmed up and then we'll go from there. Paul, let's kick off with you.
Thank you, Daniel, and welcome everyone. My name's Paul Harapin. I run Stripe's business in Asia Pacific and Japan. Stripe is a software company building economic infrastructure to enable our overall mission to increase the GDP of the internet. In doing that, we have millions of customers across the world, from small startups to the largest enterprises and governments, using our technology to both start their business, run their business, grow and innovate within their existing businesses. Everything to do with commerce online. We support many of the largest companies and startups in Southeast Asia, companies that some of whom are here today, like Grab, Lazada. We also work with Thai companies like Bania and Flow Account. And yesterday we launched our business in Thailand, of which I'm very proud as well.
Thank you very much, Paul. Inspiring. Yoon Sok.
Sure. I'm Yoon Sok Chang. I'm EVP of Market Development for MasterCard Asia Pacific. I've been a student of payments for the last 19 years in MasterCard and a student of financial services with McKinsey & Company for 10 years prior to that. One of the really cool things about MasterCard is we operate everywhere. And just in my 19-year journey in MasterCard, I've seen some really big radical changes happen in the payment ecosystem, starting with when I started off in Korea in 2003, where there was this massive explosion of card payments. And as many of you know, Korea now has one of the highest penetration of card payments. And then China happened. and the wallets that was again an amazing ride to see and witness firsthand. And India happened. And then Southeast Asia, including Thailand, has happened. So we are very honored to be in a position where we not only get front row seats, but we are actually collaborating, partnering, in order to make sure that whatever payment ecosystem exists, we contribute by trying to make it simple, safer, and smarter. And that is really the transition that we're seeing of payments, is how can you make it easier for the users, more useful, more valuable for the different stakeholders. And I think the key word is sustainability. How do you make it sustainable? And I think that is something that I feel very privileged that having been with MasterCard is something that we have a lot of experience in, is how do you make sure that you create this sustainable payment ecosystem that benefits all the stakeholders and ultimately benefits the country and all its citizens.
Thank you very much, Yun Sok. Kun Dechapon, tell us more about yourself.
Okay, thank you. สวัสดีครับทุกคน My name is Dechapon Lamulai, and I'm probably the black sheep here on the stage since I'm from securities company. So I ran strategy team in Investex Securities, which formerly known as SCBS or SCB Securities. But prior to joining, I was with the bank for almost 10 years. And at one point in time, I ran payment strategy for 3 or 4 years. So I got a little bit of background to understand what all of you talk about and the trend in the payment industry. And then I moved forward. So, but still relevant because although I'm from securities committee, but one of the trend that we see is in the blockchain space and also digital asset, right? So it's probably the trend of the future. Nobody knows whether it would take off in 3 to 5 years or longer than that. But I think one of the future that it entails is that, it has a chance to transform the future of finance. So when I talk about future of finance, it includes, capital market as well as the future banking services, which also includes payment. So in this panel, I probably talk more from the, capital market as well as, how I foresee stablecoin and CBDC becoming a very important infrastructure to enable a lot of the innovation happen in the capital market space. So thank you all.
Thank you very much. And I think this establishes context that we have today assembled before us a cast of leaders and builders that come from different parts at different intersections of the payments value chain. And I hope that will kick us off for the rest of the session today. So let's begin. Yun Sok, let's start with you. Early on, you mentioned the various countries that essentially exploded with the payments adoption rate. And you've had that front row seat opportunity to see all that evolve. And that's such an amazing story. As you look to the future of payments in Thailand, can you help us understand, as you look at those different plot lines and then you plot it out in a trajectory, what does the future of payments hold for us from, for example, an infrastructure perspective, but what are also some unique vectors for Thailand's direction of travel?
First of all, I think every country has a slightly different trajectory. However, there are some common themes. There's themes around how can you make it simpler? How can you make it safer? And how can you add more value in payments is, I think, what it's a constant across all the different markets. And what, as an outsider looking into Thailand, PromptPay, oh my God, amazing. I look at the stats and say, wow, that is incredible. And again, kudos to the policymakers. Their foresight was amazing, and timing. Talk about timing. You just had digital payments ready right at the right time. And then I think everywhere around the world, COVID has been a massive accelerator for digital payments everywhere that we operate in, and Thailand is no exception. But what is really unique about the Thai model is it's incredibly thoughtful. Because let me first caveat that no country is perfect. Every country does it their own way. They have their own regulatory, behavior, technology, nuances. However, I think Thailand was able to learn and adapt very quickly. Like in China, wallets exploded. So in some ways, technology jumped way ahead of the regulatory environment. And the regulators had to come in and pull it back and say, wait, time out, time out, time out. Let's press pause and think about what is the right regulatory framework that we want digital payments to operate under. So Thailand is kind of really distinctive in the sense that, and that's why I come back to the theme of thoughtfulness, is the Thai, not only the regulators, but all the participants really rallied around this framework, which is, again, very, very remarkable. And that's why you have this incredible frictionless takeoff and probably less trial and error than some of the other markets. I mean, you saw the India example, you did monetize. and then you then have to figure out how is digital payments going to fill the void. You saw China. Thailand, in a way, is incredibly unique in that thoughtfulness. So coming back to the infrastructure, right? A common theme that we see across many markets, particularly in Asia Pacific, is the rise of real-time payments. Infrastructure, real-time payments, as the name suggests, real-time payments is a very conceptually strong concept. And again, kudos to ITMX in Thailand, who executed beautifully. New technology brought it and scaled it at a level that no one expected, in a speed that is truly breathtaking, right? So real-time payments, and then you marry it with the technological changes, right? Taking advantage of how the world went mobile, went smartphones, which then makes the P2P transfers very smooth and seamless. And all the banks, again, just stepped up to the plate and embraced digitalization in a way that is, again, truly, truly remarkable. And the Thai citizens and consumers, adoption, again, breathtaking. You can go anywhere in Thailand now. And people have been telling me that even the elderly completely adapted to this new technology, which is, again, phenomenal, right? So all those things together, if I think about Thailand, is incredibly special and different because of that thoughtfulness and making sure that the infrastructure, the rules, the guardrails was thought in advance. And again, creating an ecosystem is an incredibly difficult exercise because you have to align so many stars. You have to educate the consumers. You need to get the financial institutions ready. You need to get the wallets ready. You need to get the infrastructure ready. You need to have the regulations ready. But aligning all of that is truly remarkable and spectacular.
Thank you very much, Yun Sok. Paul, let me turn it over to you. You just spoke earlier in your introduction about the exciting developments for Stripe in Thailand. How do you look at this, and what excites you the most about Thailand?
From a Thai perspective, and I can make some general comments across all of Southeast Asia, where a lot of the economies and central banks are becoming extremely innovative. But in Thailand, the interesting thing here is it's a highly digitized population. Right? Almost 80% of people are on the internet in some way every day. And so that combined with a lot of the initiatives and policies that are being put in place here, Thailand 4.0, the Bank of Thailand's 22 to 24 view of online payment strategy and so on, combining that together really brings all the ingredients in place to drive innovation of the online economy. And we're seeing it with the startup community as well. Lots of innovative organizations coming up from Thailand, not just operating in Thailand, but now able to access the global economy. And once that starts happening, the rest of the economy flows through. Now, not that everything's perfect. We still, particularly across all of Southeast Asia, have a lot of unbanked and underbanked members of the population, and they need help making that move to mobile and digital payments. But with initiatives like Prompt Pay, which has 43 million transactions a day and growing, it's amazing, as you said. That combination means that the environment is there. The central bank is thinking about how we evolve that. And for a comment from Stripe's perspective, working with the Bank of Thailand in such a collaborative way to understand, how we can serve the Thai people and the economy as we went along the path of getting our license was just fantastic. You don't always see that, but you can see that BOT is really thinking about the long-term future of the company and how the global digital economy, Thailand can play its part in that as one of the most digitized economies in the world today, and certainly through Southeast Asia.
Thank you very much, Paul. Yun Sok, both you and Paul talked about collaboration, the part about startups. Really interesting because at the same time of the payment adoption rate, we're seeing a parallel trajectory of fintechs driving their own innovations as much as collaboration with incumbent financial institutions. So there's always this healthy tension that we're seeing between competition and collaboration. And earlier, the governor's opening remarks spoke to that effect. And I think that would be a great opportunity to bring Kun Dechapon back into our storyline here. Kun Dechapon, you've had the opportunity to see different parts of the payment value chain play out in your various roles and now at InnovestX. Tell us a bit more how you look at the healthy tension between collaboration and competition. And most importantly, what does a good outcome look like for the people who rely on payments?
Okay. Before I answer that question, let me also top it up on the last question as well. So
yes, please.
I think payment is a starting point of many things, right? I think right now, many of the people in this room probably heard about, embedded finance, right? Payment is the core, it's a starting point, but it doesn't end there, right? Because with the payment, there's a data flow, there's all sorts of things. It's the starting of all financial services. So like buy now, pay later, that's becoming a trend in Thailand, but Indonesia, almost every bank has that, right? So I think the innovation in the payment space will start to cross-pollinate with others, financial services that currently banks are offering today. So this is something that payment is not standalone. It touches every component of banking services. So I think that's the perception and the things that I also want to highlight. And coming back to the collaboration versus competition. So I'm talking from a real example of probably not so much on the InnovestX securities, but when I was still with the SCB Bank back then. So I think it's bank has scale, right? But it probably takes time to coming up with a new product because we have quite a big risk management team, compliance. We have to answer to many regulators, no offense. So it takes time, right? And the organization is quite big, and we want to make sure that whatever we push out to the market is less impacted, right? And so one of the things that fintech has is they have speed, right? And because they have speed, they are faster at innovation and coming out with new ways, right? Because they don't have that much capital or resource like bank has, so they have to find a new way to get the same thing done in a much faster pace. So I think it's a collaboration model that would benefit both of the organization. Bank can add scale, fintech can add innovation. Basically, bank can push out new product faster to the market, and vice versa. The fintech can also get revenue from the bank and client base of the bank. So for me, that's the kind of model that I see it will be like that going forward. And in the SCB group, we also are a big investor in a lot of fintech companies. Started out in 2016. We probably have the first CVC in Thailand, thanks to Bank of Thailand. So we invest heavily in the fintech and also other, adjacent area of the fintech. And we also leverage a lot of those technologies. For example, there's probably not a payment, but it's part of the process of doing payment is the KYC, right? We're the first bank to try out eKYC using facial recognition on passport. And that was way before NDID. So we did that. We know it's, probably not going to scale. Not many people have passport. But I mean, that's the kind of innovation that, we can take technology from the fintech and basically push it out to the market. And also like cross-border payment, we're the first one to launch real-time remittance using Ripple technology, which is on blockchain. So we don't invent the technology, but we, marriage that with, what bank has as a channel to do cross-border. So I think that's the kind of collaboration model that I think would help, grow the ecosystem and everyone would benefit from it.
Kun Dechapon, I really love that. My key takeaway from all that was that innovation doesn't happen in a vacuum. And the reality is that not only does it need partnership to grow and flourish as much as it's also about unlocking other types of innovation as part of the overall ecosystem. Thank you so much for sharing that. Paul, I'd love to turn it back to you. Stripe, startup to the payments giant that it is today, has a really fascinating journey from starting as a startup all the way to today. Help us understand how Stripe looks in hindsight of its journey and then where it is today and then going forward to the future. What does collaboration and competition mean for you?
Well, I'll double down on those points. I think there's the startup landscape drives innovation. And what happens then is larger organisation, be they banks or anyone else, that maybe don't have the same setup in terms of enabling innovation, is just a natural part of becoming large as an organisation, are then inspired by what's happening in the market. And the startups effectively become organisations that prove out a concept or not prove out a concept. And as it grows, then those partnerships will change and there'll be some that become large, and I'm very happy that Stripe has done that, and we now support over 50 countries globally. And others may not. They may merge in with someone else, or maybe they'll fail in their innovation and something comes out of that. At Stripe, we've tried to take our initial growth to simplify accessing the online economy and grow that past to become a full commerce platform. And so if you think about how you tried to get online 10 years ago, it was extremely complex. You had to set up bank accounts, you had to get payments capability, get that integrated to your website and do most of that yourself. And that's evolved now. So with Stripe's global platform, you can be online, certified, KYC'd, and taking payments in up to 50 countries within 10 minutes. So the speed to market is now dramatically changed. But what's happened is the business models are starting to evolve as well. So we've seen the growth and rise of marketplace and platforms. Organisations that aren't just selling their own goods, but are providing a marketplace for many other merchants to engage and sell their goods. And that highly complex financial supply chain wouldn't have initially evolved as fast as it had if Stripe hadn't come along and developed that specific capability. We call it Connect, but it's effectively a multi-party global financial supply chain capability. So you now can sign up to one of these platforms and be selling your goods, and all the money flows are reconciled regardless of which country it happens in. And the model continues to evolve in, I'm not just charging a payment, I now want to charge a subscription. And I want to be able to send an invoice. And I want to be able to take that payment with a MasterCard, with a prompt pay, or with a Konbini in Japan, depending upon where I'm operating. And so making that really simple is key. And then as you as you become more expansive, what's the right tax to provide on my goods and services in one country versus another? And how do I reconcile that revenue flow as I continue to scale and sell more products and more services to more people in more countries? It becomes more and more complex if you're trying to do that on your own versus using a platform like Stripe that's set up to make that simpler. And we touched on embedded finance. I think that's the new wave of the evolution of payments. It's not, again, just the payments. It's how do I embed that finance in my platform and offer those services to my customers? And there's three things that we're doing, which plays to your point on talking and partnering with fintechs, with the banks and so on. We partner with banks like Citi and Goldman Sachs and Barclays and others to enable, through the same tech integration with Stripe, the ability to issue credit cards, the ability to open a bank account automatically, all online instead of taking weeks, and the ability to request a loan and then have that approved and then have that loan paid off by taking a small part of every transaction. So it's almost pain-free as you go through that process. So the landscape is changing and we're only really getting started. We're at the early days, and I think it's organisations like Bank of Thailand that are very thoughtful in their regulation and their engagement with the fintech community, so that we get the best outcome that enables merchants to grow their business, but also puts the right safeguards around fraud and everything else through the network.
Thank you very much, Paul. I think, Yun Sok, I think you planted this term thoughtfulness, and now it's just propagated throughout every person's point. And I think, no, thank you for that. This is really good stuff. Now that we've had a perspective on how different types of innovation unlocks a different type of experience in a good way for the people who rely on them, Paul, just now you talked about the Bank of Thailand. Perfect time to segue into the next segment. Earlier, the governor in his opening remarks spoke to the number of innovations that the Bank of Thailand is driving at an institutional level, for example, CBDCs. So, this is a topic that has garnered a lot of attention. For the average consumer, it might not be something that you really think about, but it's certainly something that is shaking up for each of us institutionally, organizationally, as part of the value chain. So, we'd love to get a sense from you. Yun Sok, as a network provider, I'd love to get some of your perspectives here. What is the role of CBDC, stablecoins? How does this all interplay with the future of payments?
One, again, theme, and having been in the payment space for 60 years, we've seen the evolution of technology. Technology never stops. The future is not a static state. It continues to evolve. So one thing that is, again, as a payment network, since you started with payment network, for 60 years, we've seen a huge transition. I'm old enough, I actually remember when you had paper slips and then you actually had embossed plastic cards and you made imprints, and those physical imprints then traveled around the world for clearing and settlement. I'm sorry, I'm dating myself. And later you started, wow, you could connect to a phone line. Wow, that was a big advance. And now the world has completely changed, right? In our card payment world, everything's gone digital, right? It's tokens, 16 digits tokens flying around with security, safety measures that's truly rocket scientists come up with, right? It's pretty phenomenal. So I would like to frame the central bank digital currency as, again, this is a technological advance, right? And what we have learned is that you have to embrace technology. You have to embrace new developments. And what MasterCard does is we are in the business of enabling payment ecosystems. So we embrace central bank digital currency, which is a hot topic everywhere around the world right now with central banks, and we collaborate with them. And a case in point, an example is the Central Bank of Bahamas. that has launched the sand dollars, central bank digital currency, and MasterCard is acting as the payment mechanism to link the central digital currency with merchants, right? So we are always looking for an avenue of how can we collaborate? How can we strengthen new technological developments and add our value add that from a consumer perspective, we want to make it truly very, very simple. They don't need to know what's happening all in the background, 16 digits, credentials flying around, all the algorithms that's going around there. But that is how increasingly the collaboration is about. Making it truly, truly simple and easy for the consumer, and all the difficult technical stuff is happening in the background. So I think it's a very exciting development. MasterCard is working with many different central banks in trialing it. I think no one has, maybe outside of China, people are still trying to figure this out, and we are delighted to partner with them, and then we see that as another exciting opportunity. And just as MasterCard has evolved from just being a card network, for example, here in Thailand, we partner in real-time payments. So we completely understand consumer behavior is changing, regulations is changing, technology is changing. So we have to embrace the change and find a way to continuously add value, make sure that there's choice, and make sure that we continue to drive the simplicity, the smartness, and this safety, which is at the core of what we believe is what a payment ecosystem player needs to provide.
Awesome. Kun Dechapon, I'm going to connect this to something you said earlier, which is about the stability of the infrastructure and sitting in capital markets. Surely that's one of the key fundamentals that drives your particular segment. I think this also connects back to the governor speech earlier that talks about responsible innovation, that there is a balance to be struck between healthy experimentation, being agile, being innovative, without compromising on some of the fundamentals that people expect. For example, if you make a payment, you expect the payment to go through. And it probably isn't as binary as choose one or the other. It's probably somewhere in between. So from your perspective, how does the role of CBDC enter into the play?
So, well, this is surely a difficult topic. So maybe let me take a step back and share with the audience on the way how we think about. Before we go to the CBDC, let's step back on the underlying technology, which is blockchain, the DLT, and what we see the future entails in this technology, right? So again, for us, at least for SCB Group, we see that the blockchain technology will likely change the way how we do financial services, right? And the way how we see it in two phases. So the first one is evolution. So evolution, we're talking about, blockchain added more efficiency into the things that we do in capital market as well as banking services. And the second phase is probably what we call revolution or disruption. And that, the Web3, and it's a new word, and many people are talking about it, but how I see it is if a lot of the real world asset got digitized and become in a digital token format, and everything can be transacted in a decentralized and open manner, what you see now is, so let me do a quick comparison. So now we have real sector, there's business transaction, and then there's financial layer, which do the settlement transaction, right? In the world of blockchain, the Web3, which probably in the next 5 years or later than that.
So fast?
I'm not sure. Maybe it's 10 years. I'm just, hopefully I don't get retired before it happened because that's part of my job description. But anyway, so if it happens like 5 years, the way how I see it is the, business layer and financial layer kind of converge Just like how the internet, you can, start with Web 1, you can just, it's like a big encyclopedia that everyone in the world can have access to. Web 2, the rise of Uber, Grab, and all that, you can now interact with each other, but settlements still happen in the bank. Web 3 is when bank become on the internet and basically everyone can, do business transaction and settlement everything in blockchain. So that's the later phase, how I see it. Then I'm trying to link back to the CBDC and also stablecoin, which stablecoin, the way how I see it, is kind of like synthetic, synthetic CBDC, I would say, because it's run by private sector. So not to get into detail, but I think this will be a very important infrastructure that will enable both. And I'll share with you a few examples that we're thinking about it. For example, in capital market, right? So you have investor, you have issuer who want to raise fund. Right now, issuer, if you want to raise fund, you have to get a FA, you have to get a lawyer, minimum, you probably have to pay tens of millions of baht, just to get a deal. To lawyer, whether it's large or small deal, it's all the same. They still put in the similar hours, right? Just, more zero. So the problem is costly. So mid-sized corp and SME is so difficult for them to gain access to financial market. It's too expensive, right? With the blockchain, we foresee that it could eliminate a lot of these things, right? With a smart contract, not to mention, probably not going to put lawyer out of the job, but if it can automate certain things, making the deal structure simpler and everything can be done in automated fashion, then we see the price point or the cost of, issuing, of the fundraising could be lower, which means that, more capital going across the SME, help them grow, driving the, economy. So that's the way how we see financial inclusion. On the other side, on the investor, right? With the technology, you can pretty much do fractionalization. So, before property was very expensive, you can fractionalize it. And basically any investor, whether large or small, can have access to this kind of investment. So that's how we see it. But to be able to do that, you would need a settlement infrastructure that would be able to do this in an automated fashion. And CBDC and stablecoin is that, right? Another example, probably touch on banking services. So like cross-border payment, right? Because there is no World Bank, actually there's World Bank, but they don't do settlement, right? So right now, pretty much everything done bilaterally by banks, right? Stablecoin is also can, help doing that faster, right? USDC in the US, I know now they are trying to push out a lot of these things, which I think is very interesting. It, help enable real-time, not only transaction, but also settlement to happen in automatic fashion, which I think this is also another use case that you can see the potential of, the stable coin and blockchain, solving real-world use case. And, well, another example, maybe on the domestic, of course, retail payment, I have to say it's very efficient the way it is right now with prompt pay, according to, you were mentioning about that. So I totally agree. But for corporate payments, right, there's still a lot of innovation that can happen there, right? So one of the things that, a real example, so in SCB Group, we have Digital Ventures. They are doing blockchain for procure to pay. So basically automate the PR, PO, could receive, invoice receipt to payment. So basically, we automate this and help lower the cost of doing that transaction. Next step is if we can tokenize the invoice, right? And basically help a lot of those small suppliers to gain access to like investor on blockchain. That's also something that we foresee could have happened, right? So I don't want to go on. There are so many use cases that we have been thinking about, but again, the very important thing, coming back to the sustainability, right? I think innovation and the adoption has to come with a regulation. So for all this to happen sustainably, I think we need to work very closely with the regulator, right? To again, make sure that, it's going in a pace that it's not going to come down quickly like crypto, right? Going up fast and coming down. Nobody think it will ever come down, but it happens. That's the fact of life. So if we want sustainable innovation, I think regulation is very important. And gotta thanks to Bank of Thailand. We're in this, they're very open, and also there's a lot of dialogue that we're having, and I think this would help shape the innovation to be in a way that is very sustainable.
Thank you very much, Kun Dechapon. And we've now reached almost the tail end of our segment. So earlier we heard from each of you on the various innovations that are happening either on the back end or the front end or even the middle layer. And for the audience today, whether you're a consumer, you're a technology player, a bank, whichever sector you may come from, there's a lot to unpack from our panelists today. So just to give us a call to action to rally us forward for the future, I'd like to invite each panelist. How do we make sense of the various innovations today? What advice do you have for our audience to plan for today, but also anticipate that the future is going to be never normal? So, Paul, let's start.
I think it's all about working with different offerings, different partners, and really understanding what you want to achieve in your business so that you can understand enough about all of the innovations to leverage them the right way. And whilst we've innovated a lot in this payments area, we're still at the beginning. If there's 14% approximately of the world's commerce is online, which means 86% is still old world offline. So as that journey continues, what are the things that hold us back? The things that we just talked about then. There's still a lot of processes and procedures that are caught in the past and haven't been automated and disrupted to enable commerce to move faster. Right? There's still some countries I go to where the invoice has to have a chop stamp put on it and taken to the bank to get paid. So where that is the situation, obviously the pace of innovation needs to speed up a little bit. I sort of break it down into 3 or 4 areas. What type of organisation you are and what you're trying to achieve. So what Stripe's trying to do is remove those barriers. And we continue to innovate. But if you're a small startup, what's really important to you? You want to start your business, you want to get it online, and you want to start selling your goods and services as quickly as possible, because the longer you take to do that, the more cost that's involved in doing that, the less revenue that's coming through. And in many cases in the past, organisations would get stuck there and could potentially fail. So to be able to innovate, to move faster is really, really key. For larger companies that may have been around and not born in the cloud, it's how do they enable innovation with new business models and new services, or a different approach to existing services within their own business. And so we're doing work. One of our customers globally is Ford. And you think, well, how connected on payments is a car manufacturer? Well, the fact is that cars now are becoming connected internet-based vehicles. And so you can do everything from pay your deposit, turn up to take your car, book your next service, and the next step from that is to start ordering different types of services, perhaps not related to the car, whilst driving. And all of that happens online through your Ford account in the car. And so, again, beginning of the innovation cycle within a 100-plus-year-old organisation, and we're seeing that all over the world. Cross-border payments is really important as well. The innovation isn't siloed to one country. There's great innovation coming out of many countries, and if a startup in Thailand wants to sell their goods and services, like Story-A, if anyone knows Story-A, which is a digital animation platform, most of what they sell is in Europe and the US, all from Thailand, really simply. So, and the final thing is just removing barriers, reducing costs to enable a faster time to market for everyone is really key.
Thank you very much, Paul. Yun Sok?
We've been in this business for 60 years, and we have a 6-point advice. 1, keep a pulse on customer behavior. 2, watch out for technology. Don't get blindsided by technology. 3, understand regulatory changes. 4, understand the competitive landscape. 5, understand what you're good at and how you're going to be able to succeed. And 6, talk to MasterCard.
Awesome. Thank you. คุณเดชพร
Okay, so we ran out of time, so I'll just cut it short. So I think innovation for me is, a design experimentation where you just keep validating assumption and you do it under, framework of a regulation. And again, because there's too many unknown, like you said, watch out for technology, right? So to be able to do that and in a good manner, you have to, keep validating your assumption until you get enough insight to be sure that you really solve real life problem. Then you scale from there. So I think that's the approach that we have been trying to do. And again, working closely with the regulators and also hopefully we can get some of the project into the sandbox. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's amazing. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being so generous with your stories, your time, your insights. I think if I had to super summarize what we discussed today is that technology is the business and that no matter where we go amidst the various innovations, that we remain grounded on this shared conviction that it's all about serving the people who depend on payments. So thank you very much. Please join me in thanking Paul, Yun Suk, and Kun Dechapon for joining us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. What a wonderful session that we have discussed all the payments of the future, and I believe this will really reiterate and elaborate the idea exciting. We'll be talking about enhancing frictionless cross-border payments for all. Again, the Bank of Thailand co-hosted with Thai Bankers Association and Payment System Office. And the next session, enhancing frictionless cross-border payments for all, we have the honor from the honorable guest speakers and also the moderator, Kun Paliwat Kanithasen, Deputy Director Payment Systems Policy Department from the Bank of Thailand. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome all the speakers on the stage.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our session on cross-border payments. Let me first introduce you to our panelists here. Thank you for being here with us. First, we have Mr. Sabnendu Mohanty, the Chief FinTech Officer of the Monetary Authority of Singapore. Please give him a hand. And then we have Mr. Shirish Vadivkar, the Global Head of Payments and Strategy from SWIFT. And then over there, we have Kun Kittipong Muttamara, the Executive Vice President of Krung Thai Bank. Well, cross-border payments, it's a very hot topic right now, and right here in Southeast Asia. Well, Singapore and Thailand, we've launched PromptPay Pay Now, which is the first linkage of two fast payment systems in the world. And it was launched last year. We won an award for it as well. And after that, it was followed by a flurry of activities on QR payment linkages among other countries in the region: Malaysia, Thailand, Singapore, Indonesia, Vietnam. I was recently in Singapore, and from the airport to the hotel, I was able to pay using my Krung Thai Bank app by scanning the QR there. So it was as convenient as a PromptPay payment. So this is what we've been doing lately. And these new payment linkages are now offering cheaper, faster, more inclusive, and of course, frictionless cross-border payments to all. Now, the question for all of us here, this afternoon is what's next for cross-border payments. We've been establishing several bilateral payment linkages, linking up fast payment networks, but now there's also a multilateral payment linkage in the making. There's these new payment linkages versus what SWIFT has been doing for 50 years, right, Mr. Shirish? 50 years, right? So linking up cross-border, linking up all the commercial banks in the world. And we have the issue of banks versus non-banks as well. So the new payment landscape would be characterized by banks and non-banks. How are they regulated? What do banks see in these new competitors? So these are the questions that we'll be discussing today with our very esteemed speakers. The speakers we have are a central banker, Mr. Subnendu, a commercial banker, Kun Kitipong, and what do you call SWIFT? I have here a global payments messaging network provider. Is that correct, Mr. Shirish?
Well done.
Yeah, okay. So let's start here. First round of questions to each and every one of you. Can you share your work, what you've been doing on cross-border payments, any pet projects you would like to highlight? I'll start with you, Chief Subnendu.
Thanks, thanks for having all of us here. Well, if you ask me what we are doing, I think there's a long list. Starting from in 2016, we had this foundational strategy in Singapore that to make a country truly a digitally enabled country in terms of economic consideration, we got to get 4 things right: our digital ID, our interoperable payment system, our trusted data systems, and consent system, consumer consent system. So the second pillar was payment infrastructure. Like Thailand, we created a proxy-based platform called PromptPay in Thailand and Pay Now in Singapore. We also started thinking about unifying our QR codes in Singapore, unified our point of sales devices in Singapore. So that whole set of cleanup was done last 5-6 years. And then we started doing cross-border to start with PromptPay, now with India and Malaysia, and hopefully more countries. But that's on the account transfers. But on the merchant side, we also started looking at making it the merchant payment, which primarily to my mind is not a public sector, it's largely driven by private sector. And we create a lot of incentives for them to build those capacity for cross-border and domestic merchant acceptance digitization. And that's broadly what we're doing for the last 5-6 years. Of course, we have exciting thing to talk about what is happening in future after this round.
So many things. Now to you, Mr. Shirish.
So I think very interestingly, the same 2016 was when SWIFT started on its GPI journey, which is where a group of banks got together and realized that international payments were not really as smooth as they were supposed to be. In a world where you could trace a small purchase item you made on a shopping portal right to your doorstep, when you get alerts about shipping is on its way, the courier is on its way, it has reached your door, and you've signed. When you had that level of traceability for a small e-commerce item, we could not have that on payments. That's when we realized as banks and using SWIFT together, we said that this has to change. And that's how GPI was born. With 4 key things to deliver, GPI was born to deliver traceability, complete transparency on fees. It was supposed to have, it had a shorter SLA, so time-bound delivery of payments, and a promise that will deliver all information that was sent from the initial of the payment right to the end of the payment. So that was how GPI was born. But that's not all we do in SWIFT. We also do a lot more on standards, which is to make sure that we do not end up with different parts of the world talking different languages, and then we spend a lot more energy, money, effort in trying to convert it into a single format, a single conversation. So standards and ISO 20022, if you have not heard about it, you should, is what we promote for international cross-border. We also do a lot more work on interoperability, because we see a lot of digital islands across the world that could be improved for their own sake if they connect well. So if you really look at what SWIFT payment strategy has been, or we currently say, it's quite aligned to the statement on this particular panel. Our strategy is quite simple. It says that transfer money in all its forms, or transfer value in all its forms, quickly, securely, and as seamlessly as possible for all. That's what the strategy of SWIFT is. So it's tremendous pleasure for me. Thank you so much for inviting me here, because it aligns with what we do at SWIFT, and I hope to communicate what more we can do with you guys in the later conversations. Thank you.
So good to hear that SWIFT has been innovating all the time. Now to you, Kun Kittipong, Krung Thai Bank.
Okay, thank you for having me here, right? First of all, when we talk about this QR cross-border payments back in 2-3 years ago, right? Back then we were thinking about something that how we going to create some kind of same experience for the customers who are using QR payment in Thailand. So, back then, if you think about that, right? See, we have about 5 million merchant acceptance point in Thailand, and we have about 3 million people using QR code payment there. So we think about how these people, when they travel abroad, the first thing that we come to my mind is that how they going to use the same experience that they adopt in Thailand and go to other country with the same experience there. So we start conversation with the Nets acquirer in Singapore. At the beginning, we just talking to like the bank partner. We see that hey, we have some kind of customers adoption on the QR for both country already, and why don't we just do some kind of like exchanging some messaging, because of when you identify the merchants for make payments, right? It's very simple. You just translate those messaging back to Thailand. At the same time, when Thailand scan the QR code in Singapore, vice versa, right? We can exchange that data. And we're trying to make sure it's very simple as much as we can. So we just launched it. And when we want to scale it up, we see that, hey, why don't we just connect with the ITMX, with our local switching here, and connect with the switch in Singapore. Now we can have more banks and joints on this same experience like KTB doing. So that's on the payment piece, right? On the remittance, we also thinking about something like how are we going to offer this kind of service to a very end customer. There are three principles that we set up there with the Bank of Thailand as well. Three things is the simple, secure, and also save cost for them, right? Because we do transfer money, it's very costly when you transfer some kind of small money. At that time, we don't have any services for those customers who actually want to receive or sending money with a low value. So that's why the prompt pay now has become one of the things that we can serve those kind of needs of the customers by stick with the three principles: simple, secure, and save cost.
Thank you very much. Simple, secure, and save cost. Three key principles that we should remember. Now, we've been talking about prompt pay now and several QR payment linkages that Kun Kittipong and his bank have been establishing with other countries in the region through our operator NITMX. So various bilaterals are flourishing here in Southeast Asia, but there's also talk about multilateral linkages because if we keep spending resources and time developing one bilateral, it takes quite a while to reach every country in the world, right? So with this in mind, how do you see, Chief Somnendum, the question of bilaterals versus multilateral linkages? What benefits do each have, and how do you see the future?
Sure. I think we have to appreciate that the Thailand prompt pay now connectivity is many sense a very significant milestone in the payment network, because the first time two domestic network of two different jurisdictions of completely different rules and regulation are able to talk to each other. And why I say this significant? Because it took us 3 years to do it. Despite on the paper it looked like similar, prompt pay now, proxy-based system, you would wonder that why couldn't we do it in few months? It took us 3 years. Why? Regulations were different. The processes were different. There are certain rules were different. And it's very hard to go and change that to make it work instantly. Now, the learnings we had out of the prompt pay now connectivity, we did make it better to our next country. The next country we're connecting now is India. and we have achieved human productivity, which is 9 months. So India is getting connected within 9 months because all the lessons learned from this Thai-Singapore connectivity, we could optimize in India corridor. But India is far more complex than Thailand. At least in Thailand case, we don't have that much complex capital control rules. In India, it is extremely complex because the outgoing money from India has got a lot of forex control rules. And when you are doing this trade through point-to-point transfer, it's going to be completely difficult, complex process. So you have to automate all this piece. Then came along Malaysia. And Malaysia is relatively simpler than India and Thailand because very similar structures we have in, and plus the way regulators are organized also makes a huge difference. Malaysia, like Singapore, is very similar. Of course Malaysia has a separate supervisor and central bank. But Singapore has the advantage of a single structure, supervisor and central bank. We could do many things yourself. You have your AML regulator somewhere else. So we have this complex multi-regulatory challenge. So imagine if you do it to every country. You will just go crazy. And it costs a lot of money, millions of dollars are spent when you do bilateral connectivity. So this is not a sustainable process going forward. But before I go to the multilateral connectivity, the question we're asking ourselves, what is the use of this domestic payment connectivity? And based on the data we are seeing today, it seems to me low value cash transfer will be the preferred way when it comes to choosing the network. It will be this domestic payment connectivity. Because what we observed between the Thailand and Singapore connectivity, that a migrant worker in Singapore are remitting back home 4 times a month. Roughly they get $1,000 or some $800 to save in a month. And earlier they used to wait once in a month to send money back home, and that to paying 10-15% of expenses. Now they're doing every week, which means in their mind it has become a local transfer, small value transfer. And that psychological break is a huge social impact on bottom of the segment population. So it has added its value. We know that we need this network. Now the question is, shall we make it a multilateral connectivity to make it efficient? Well, on paper it looks good. We did a project with Bank for International Settlement called Project Nexus, which went through this complex process. There's an architecture document. There's a governance structure recommendation out there. And it talks about how multiple countries can come through a common gateway and able to replicate, able to participate together for a multilateral infrastructure. But I can tell you, when we'll actually start doing it, it will become more complex. And I was chatting with, at what time? My morning with him, saying that how do you cover your liability risk if somebody hacks into this multilateral single gateway, a single point of failure? How does that entity guarantees or covers the liability for any hack on the system? So that is complex governance, regulatory, and alignment of different countries' regulatory practices to build this multilateral connectivity. So while the intent is there through Project Nexus, we will do it. The good news is ASEAN Plus 5 have announced their intent to come together, including Thailand, to build this common infrastructure. I think that's the way forward, but I will tell everybody in the audience, don't think that will be simple. It will be perhaps more complex than this bilateral. Who knows? So let's see how it goes. But my sense is that there's no other way. If we truly want to build a super scale, low value, point-to-point transfer of money, we have to go through the multilateral way. Maybe there's on the way down there, we'll figure out a better solution, a better approach. Some regulatory compromise has to happen between the regulators to align themselves for a common good. Unless we get that, it will be very difficult to achieve. So that's my sense briefly on the multilateral connectivity. We are optimistic we'll get there in a few years.
So not just good on paper, but reality as well.
Yeah, it's a very complex process. And the reason why SWIFT still survives for 50 years because of the complexity. And we sometimes, when you remove this correspondent bank, you realize how much manual work they do, which you don't realize. And when you try to automate, it's just complex process.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chief Subnandu. Now to you, SWIFT, Mr. Shirish. You've been hearing us talking about these linkages, and these bilateral linkages or multilateral in the making do happen because of this motivation of addressing the pain points in traditional cross-border payments through correspondent banking networks, which are costly, which take like T+2 days to arrive, and it's not that quite transparent. You never know what cost you're paying, or the beneficiary doesn't know. This has been in the making for like 50 years. How has SWIFT responded to this, and what new innovations has SWIFT brought about to address these very pain points?
Thank you again. I think first I should realize that I'm very happy that similar words around the SWIFT strategy are being talked about: simple, seamless, interconnectivity, interoperability, and this is important. That the community, that SWIFT is a community which is owned by banks. We are a cooperative that banks own. So it's great that we resonate what the banks want to solve for. In that same resonation, what we will talk about GPI. It's a nice time to look back and see what was delivered. So today we have, let's talk about adoption first. Right? On an adoption level, we have around 2,000 banks who do GPI transactions across the world. Roughly 80% of all cross-border transactions on SWIFT are GPI, fully GPI enabled, which means you get the same transparency, traceability, end-to-end SLA of delivering the payment in faster time frame, and the full data guarantee that starts and ends. What have we? This adoption statistics should also is there some real value, or just this adoption? No, there is real value. The real value means that we are seeing roughly 50% of payments start from account to account. I'm not talking about bank to bank. I'm talking about starting payment from an account, terminating an account. 50% of those payments are getting delivered in 5 minutes or less. Right? This is the real power of what the community has come together to deliver, that we realized that we need to create a faster, efficient layer of SWIFT payments, which is GPI. We actually deliver, around 100% of the payments get delivered within a day. That's the real value generating. So around 500 billion payments every day are GPI executed. So there is some real value we created, and it's not just about making payments faster, but for banks, like Sapnendu was referring to manual activities, because of the fact that the payments are now traceable, the number of inquiries have come down, number of complaints have come down, investigations are easier, because we didn't just stop at making GPI as just traceable. We added services over it. We added stop and recall, allowing transactions to be immediately withdrawn from the network if you detect something wrong with the transaction or there's a cancellation. We've added stuff like case management, which is helping banks to investigate the payment. So payments 5 years ago and payments today are very different. Yes, it's the problem or the challenge that we have as SWIFT is that we want to do this on an open network. It's an open loop network. Schemes or closed loop networks actually control a lot more endpoints. You control the start point, you control the end point, you have bilateral connectivity at times. So you have much more control on the network, but SWIFT is open loop. We want everybody to wake up, we want you to realize that and work together and innovate along with us. So that's one thing. At the same time, I want to refer back to interoperability and why it is important. So we would also want to help the interoperability connections, because we've realized over time a lot of digital islands have got created, whether it is CBDCs or even RTGSs. We are very happy to interconnect anything with value to help provide the standardized standards, so as to try and make sure that the effectiveness of a multilateral connection or a bilateral connection that Swapnendu was talking about can be much more efficient. You can just rely on a single standard or a single connection you have, where SWIFT or otherwise, to be able to start connecting to those networks, so that we don't lose value, we don't lose the fact that you are driving innovation. At the end of the day, our job and the mission of SWIFT is towards the financial community, and we want to drive, inclusive digital economy via the mission that we have at SWIFT.
Maybe you should if we ever do a public RFP, you should pitch for the ASEAN +5.
Done. My team is listening, so done. No, but I think there is value because over time we have done so many different things, and I think, for example, recently we announced connectivity from a CBDC to RTGS. Now, CBDC network to RTGS, but it is still, like Saprindu said, this technical connectivity. There's a lot more work that we have to do with all of you to make sure that the legal connectivity, the process connectivity all works.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's a great time for payments. I personally believe, and this is not just SWIFT, but I believe this, that payments is the most collaborative challenge of our times. If we solve this, there is prosperity and growth for all at the end of that rainbow.
You know, before you go, very quick one.
Please.
You know, one of the challenges of this multilateral connectivity will be, you remember when we connected, we almost forced, banks are here, right? Yeah. We forced banks to get off 70% of the revenue. Now, imagine if you're going to multilateral, why do you think banks are incentivized to let go 70% of the revenue from existing revenue pool? That's a huge elephant in the room. Right. Because by connecting our payment system, democratizing the network, and making it as a social good, we are going to tell banks, you must get rid of 70% of money you're making out of moving money. That's a shift. That's a shift.
It's a tough call, but it's a very tough call.
And that is a bigger problem to solve.
Which then leads me to, as a banker, how do you respond to this? Actually, Krung Thai was pioneering Prompt Pay Now as well, and also the Nest QR was pioneered by linkage with your bank, and also your bank has customers can use Krung Thai Bank to engage in SWIFT transactions with other countries. So, with all the various mechanics at hand, how do you respond to this and the future?
I know, remember that's the 3% target of moving money?
Yes, there's a target, and now.
I think to begin with, because when you mention something like when we start from bilateral connectivity, right? We start from payments, not remittance, because of they're less complex in terms of regulatories, right? So payment is very simple because we just transact like you pay cash, but you replace cash with something else like mobile phone, QR, whatever. But remittance is another animals, right? We talked about this 3 years ago. We talked about this Prompt Pay Now. First thing that comes to my mind said, hey, it's going to be very simple, like QR payments, right? We have connected with the switch to switch already. We just enhance it so it become like a remittance. But you know what? The funny thing is that right now you can go to Singapore, you can make payment to QR code payment for taxi using whatever banks right now in Thailand. Any bank now can do it. For Krung Thai, we can scan and make payment. But you know what? In Singapore, Grabs take the other way. They take Prompt Pay Now for receiving cash. They're not using QR payment. So I think the adoption is kind of like, when we got used to it, right? It doesn't matter for the recipient side. They can using QR for payment or even international remittance. And thank for that because Prompt Pay International, it's very low value transaction fees, right? So it's very suitable for taxi driver or Grabs to take money from a foreigner. You imagine you can transfer money from my wallet account to the Grab driver real time. It doesn't really happen in other global markets. It's just the first time we do it. So we think this bilateral is not it's a bad guy. We start with the bilateral because CV adoption is now popularity. We can see transaction growing every day, right? But talking about multilaterals, I think that's another story. You mentioned something like regulatory is different, right? Even bilateral would take 3 years, but multilateral should be take more than 5 years, right? But at the end of the game here, we think about how they make people who travel not only to Singapore, to Indonesia, to Malaysia, they can use the same experience, right? They can do some kind of this QR payment. Right now, Thailand also have connectivity from ITMX to Indonesia already, and other 6 countries. And Singapore also connect to India already. Actually, we connect the dots, right? We can have the networks already. But how to build that network more efficiency, that's the key. Because of every hubs or every stop, right? When you do some kind of money transfer, there will be three things in the procedure. First, even the sending bank or receiving money to do some kind of verifications, approval, and then settlement, right? And those three things are very costly to the bank operator. Cutting down revenue, it doesn't really, matter. But how are we going to make sure that the transaction could be lower cost, and at the same time, we cut down from large volume. For example, like you mentioned, 10,000 can break down into 4 transactions. The fee can cut by 4 times, right? And the bank can actually losing something, but can gain more scales on that one. So I think that's the game that we are talking about for a bank perspective.
So the banks are losing something, but they gain some other things too. So
and
That's a good thing.
The point is that I was a former banker, so the former banker in me wakes up sometimes, is that if you don't disrupt yourself, somebody will disrupt you. So the chasing value versus chasing pricing is 2 different things.
And it's to be fair to banks, they were running extremely expensive payment system before this. So the cost of infrastructure, thanks to GPI and all this thing, has come down, but the fees didn't come proportionate to the efficiency. I think that's what happened.
Quite possible.
It from time to time it will lower sooner.
Yeah, thank you.
thank you very much. Now, talking about banks, we can't mention the other player in the room, which is non-banks, right? And we've recently seen new waves of non-bank payment providers come into play. As a regulator, Chief Samnendu, how do you see this competition play out?
What I'm going to say, I'm sure my fellow regulators will not like it. Even in Singapore, it took us time to allow non-bank players to connect to our faster payment system. And it took time because under this, banks were telling the systems are not good. If they connect to our faster payment system, they will cause more systemic risk, a whole set of things. And we had to argue saying that I can bet that the new fintech companies, the systems are far superior than bank system. You just don't want to acknowledge that. They may have a weak governance structure, fair, that's a fair assessment. Fintechs don't have a strong governance structure as banks being regulated to do it. All we need to do is to set up a higher regulatory standard for these fintechs to be up there. But I don't see a technology gap between them and the bank, which should be a barrier to connectivity. So we fixed that. So today in Singapore, non-banks can connect to the faster payment system. Even for connecting to the pay now QR, prompt pay, there's a scheme we created. There's also a barrier to connect there. So my sense is that the non-bank player today by design have a better ability to deal with low value, multiple payment mode, whether it's merchant acceptance or the peer-to-peer transfer. And also, they also use same data to issue other banking services like credit services based on payment data. So they have this innovation aspect to that. Plus, today we know banks don't serve every customer. 30 to 40% of our population are unbanked, and banks are not going to serve them anyway. They're not today. You look at today's statistics: 50% unbanked. Who is going to serve them? It will be the non-bank. And if you don't allow non-banks to participate in the network, how are you going to solve that problem? So one option could be the non-banks can create their own network and operate. But we cannot deny 50% of our population in the Asian market access to financial services and then tell the non-banks who are serving them should not be allowed on the network. That doesn't work. So in my sense, the 2 things will happen. First thing, most regulators will start thinking of bringing them to the network, at least on the payment rails. They will serve this unbanked sector at a different price point. And perhaps they may think about an alternate clearing system. I think in India, they started thinking about competing clearing houses, right? The second clearing house. Could be there's another way to do it. So there's this new thinking coming around non-bank players, but we cannot deny them participating in the network and helping large, almost 50% of our population who are today are not banked by the banks.
Thank you very much. So very interesting point you made here. Let me throw the question to Kun Titipong now. As a banker, you've heard that for Singapore, it took a while for non-banks to be able to access the payment rails. Is that possible in the future for Thailand as well as the owner of our own rail? And what do you see? Chief Subnendu also mentioned the financial inclusion perspective of this issue, how the non-banks may help address this issue too. So perhaps some key thoughts from you on these two ideas.
Thank you for that question. I think it's interesting when we talk about this, right? We've been fighting with non-banks so many rounds and many years. And we are also, I used to be the chairman of the non-bank association as well before I joined the bank. I know how to think, how they thought about this. I know how painful they've gone through this one. I knew that in future we cannot just, stop them. I think to be fair, talk about 2-3 things, right? Level playing fields, right? I think that one we already lift up some standard already. I see a lot of the non-bank or fintech is now lift up their to compliance standards now already. The KYC process now been improved. So sooner or later, I think there will be no objections that not allow them to join the network. But I think the focus thing that I have in my mind is 2 words that I have in my mind now is it's financial inclusions and also the innovations, right? I think these 2 things need to be, more open up for any players. Bank can do some at certain level, but talk about non-bank and fintechs, right? This also can answer in terms of reaching out to a very long tail customers. At the same time, innovation that the bank cannot compete with the fintech. So I think these 2 things can reach out to those unbanked customers. Same thing that we are talking about this. I think KTB or Krung Thai Bank also very concerned on this one because we are one of the government bank that trying to lift up their financial inclusion services to those unbanked customers. Very lucky that we also have some kind of government project that we already supported. We have about 40 million customers, which is using the mobile application called Baotang apps. Those customers, I think almost all of them could be under consideration as unbanked customer segment and reach out to those customers with the government subsidies program already. So the way that we can reach out to this one is already there. Technology is already there. They already adopt the technology already. So I think it doesn't matter. It could be non-bank or even KTB can do ourselves by reaching out for those customers. And especially for Thailand, we are not just sending money back to other countries. We are receiving bank. So majority of people in Thailand, 70% of the volume internationally limited, it's inward to Thailand. And talking about those actually living in up country whereby they have families, they have a daughter and brother and sister, whatever, working in other country as a migrant worker. When they send back home money, the process, as you mentioned, they wait for 4 months or 6 months to send money back home because of the fee it'd be a hurdle for them because cost per transaction is going to be very high. So that's why if we talk about the financial inclusion and make sure the rail is more efficiency, the cost along the way is cheaper. So meaning we can direct transfer from the migrant worker in Singapore or in Indonesia back to their hometown, their parents, through their wallets. And that could be another game changer for financial inclusion. It doesn't matter that KTB can do it. I think, to be fair, I think if non-bank and fintech can do it, I think that should be one of the things that we cannot stop it.
Okay, good to see you that you're agnostic on this, and that efficiency would lead to more financial inclusion. Now,
but I think we should not forget he made a very good point. We cannot give fintech a free pass to the rails just because they're serving unbanked. They must step up to the regulatory obligations like a bank, and that's non-negotiable.
Yes, of course. All the prudential requirements for like a bank should be there for regulating these companies too. Now, Mr. Shirish, you've heard us talk about all these retail payment linkages and cross-border retail payments. SWIFT has been mostly catered towards business B2B payments among companies. Now, do you intend to see a place where SWIFT would focus on retail payments as well?
So it's a very interesting question. So technically speaking, SWIFT is value agnostic. We do not consider, because whatever payments come through banks, we deliver. So it's not about SWIFT caters to only B2B payments or not. So, and anyway, the GPI wave raised all the ships. So every single payment that went via SWIFT became efficient. Now, if we really come to low value payments, and which is also similar to retail payments or SME payments, that's the fastest growing segment on payments today, not just on SWIFT, but globally. And Sapnendu also referred to it about how fast this segment is growing, not just for the unbanked, but even at the banked level. And there are multiple reasons for this. We heard the session earlier about Web 3.0 and the integration of financial services inside the internet. But today, a lot of these financial services are already integrated inside the processes of the companies. So accounts payable has become really efficient. Automated, better systems like faster payments in Singapore and PromptPay has probably led to more corporate payments going on that rail than typically over ACH or RTGS. So considering all of these conversations in mind, we said we should focus something on the low value side of the payment rail, because the reason that what customers want there actually is guaranteed value cost, full value delivery, which means the payment reaches, if you send 1,000 baht gets there. We want that, and we want it to be done faster in time. So we actually went to what is called now as Swift Go. Now Swift Go is a variant on GPI. So it has the same platform benefits of GPI, traceability, transparency, end-to-end visibility of the payment, but it has a higher standard, which is banks have to collaborate and create a single price point. They have to collaborate and make sure the payment is not deducted across the way. And they have to deliver the payment faster than they would deliver a GPI payment. Now, this is what we have on Swift Go. We already have around 400 banks signed up. 100 banks will go live before the end of the year. Around 30, 40 of them already are live. And even with the banks are live, we are actually seeing roughly around 87% payments getting delivered in 5 minutes or less. So to the extent that what we are trying to do with specific to low value payments, it is our focus on retail, incidentally, because that's where the low value payment growth is. So we are agnostic to value, but we are focused on the retail segment because of the tremendous volume potential it has.
Yes, indeed. Time's almost up. Let me ask you to take out your crystal balls and tell us what's going to happen in, say, 5 years in terms of cross-border payment landscape. Begin with you, Chief Sapnendu.
So by connecting our PromptPay Pay now, we brought down the 15% cost of a $100 transfer to 3% plus minus. Can we reduce the 3% to less than $1? To me, that's the intermediate future. And to answer that, I think today we believe CBDC is the answer, because the networks are connected. What we need to do, find an elegant way to do an atomic reconciliation on the policy side and some reconciliation side. There's no better instrument than a wholesale CBDC to do it. I think the Project Dunbar and Project Jura and all these projects central banks are doing, Thailand is doing with Hong Kong, Etheon. So all these projects will lead to this conclusion that you need to have a wholesale CBDC, which can be used to reduce this cost of transfer from 3% to less than 1%, further loss of revenue for banks, because the cost has to go down there. The second one will be much more dramatic. Today, when we pay somebody for taking ownership of an asset, it's a two-step process. I want to buy that chair from that gentleman. We agree for a price. I take ownership by paying him. Two processes, right? And the ownership transfer typically takes T plus 2, T plus 3. There are many processes. And the payment process also may take time, because till that is settled, you don't actually transfer the money. The future will be a single transaction. The transfer of ownership and the transfer of payment are atomic, running on a single network. And the answer to that is a digital currency, which is a new form of money of existing fiat, which will be used to settle this transaction. So to me, the future is a single transaction of ownership transfer and transfer of value. So this too will make the whole payment process completely upside down.
Okay, wow, what a future. And now to you, Mr. Shirish, what do you see in the next 5 years?
So I'll add two other elements to this conversation. I'll add the element of data. I think as payments become richer and richer, ISO carrying so much information on the payment and they become faster, we will start having payments that are aware of, data aware or context aware. I know I am buying a chair. The payment will be context aware of what it's supposed to do, and we can then apply better processing rules. That's another way of bringing the payment cost down, because it's not just about making the payment faster, but we also have to make it lighter. So context aware payments because of data are something that I would really want to bet on. The second thing I'm going to bet on is the payments will slightly start, I would love for them to disappear, which means that not that they will disappear, that I don't owe you any money, but the fact that they become machine to machine. So we'll have a lot more payments going beyond automate inside the process itself. Something like Sapnendo's point, not necessarily CBDC or otherwise, I'm not quite agnostic to that. But machine-to-machine payments require a much more stronger connection, better standards, translation error, no translation error, nobody sitting and repairing payments. So we want to see that level of automation that will drive the progress and the commerce forward.
Thank you. Kun Kittipong, please.
You already have my answer already, but I'll the last one. I think there were two things that I had to mention here. First, I agree that CBDC is the final answer. By doing that, I think the aims of our as a banker, we also try to reduce the cost, the fee to the customer. That's the ultimate goal, right? We aim to get less than $1 per transaction, but we're fighting for that. And we've been fighting for that for many conversations. How are we going to reduce that to $1 fee, right? Because of the cost is all the way. The bank A and bank B need to do the same process, verifications, authentications, and approve it, and process, and settlements, right? Those kind of things is costs. If you add up the cost, right, all the value chain is going to be more than $1. But if CBDC comes into play, it would reduce all the unnecessary costs. For example, like the settlement with no settlement at all. Unlike the fiat currency right now we're using, we don't have to go and verify point by point because we already know the ownership of the money, who's sending, who's receiving. So that kind of thing if we can get rid of those kind of unnecessary protocol, we reduce a huge cost of it. So that's one will end up with low value cost for those actually for all customers. The other point that I think we'll mention here is on the payment side, right? We see a lot of people adopting in Thailand very much in terms of prompt pay now. But we talk about when you go abroad, right? The same experience. If you going to make some payment at the shops in Singapore, you very uncomfortable to show your mobile phone and say, hey, I want to pay by QR codes, right? So I think the piece that we need to talk about here is how to have a standardized communication, education to those customers. When you see this logo, you can make payment there. Similar thing as in Thailand, if you go into the shop right now in Thailand, if you ask for the bill, you don't need to tell them that you need to pay by QR code. You just show your phone. They will bring you the QR paper and you can scan. Same thing, if we can do same thing, we just flash the QR code there in Singapore and the merchant come up with, hey, this is your QR mode of payment. And this is going to be more and more adoption in terms of the education. So that's why I think that in the next 5 years, I would like to see that we have a single vision that amongst a country corridor in AP or in Southeast Asia, we could have something like a symbolic that we can endorse it and say, this is our cross-border network payment, similar to Alipay Plus is now doing. They across the region using Alipay Plus as a logo for commodity. But they can see this, they can make a payment there. So I think that's what we want to see in the next 5 years from now.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for a very interesting discussion. We've changed the landscape of cross-border payments and the way users using cross-border payments in the past 2 or 3 years. And what we've heard just now is that the future looks even brighter than the present right now. So please give a big hand to all 3 panelists here, Chief Sabnendu, Mr. Shirish, and Kun Kitiplong. Thank you very much. Before we close this session, let me remind you that there's live demonstrations of QR cross-border payments downstairs in the library on the 2nd floor between Thailand and Indonesia. So the assistant governors of the Bank of Thailand and Bank of Indonesia are there to demonstrate live QR demonstrations of cross-border payments. Thank you very much. Please stand for a group photo.
Thank you very much to all the panelists for the fruitful discussion on enhancing frictionless cross-border payment for all. And once again, thank you to our co-host, the Thai Bankers Association and Payment System Office. That was such an insightful session on cross-border payments, and we are hoping that traveling into Singapore will be much easier when we are performing payments. Now, next session, on to our next session, the panel. Before we join the panel of experts on digital ID, we have a very, very special keynote speech on the evolution of digital identity. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Anushita Nukun onto the stage, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm not sure that this is going to be a keynote speaker because I think they'll just want me to talk and then without discussing with other people. But anyway, before I start telling you about digital ID infrastructure, especially in Thailand, I think we should first get the same understanding what we actually mean by digital infrastructure first. Otherwise, it's going to be, we're talking about different things. And so to make us understand about the word digital infrastructure, I'd like to draw a parallel with the other kind of digital infrastructure that we have already implemented in Thailand and many people are quite familiar with, that is payment system. In payment system that was mentioned many times on the stage, another the name of PromptPay is a digital infrastructure for payment. And digital infrastructure for digital ID is the same concept of being an infrastructure. Let's say without the infrastructure, what would happen? Let's say if I have to transact with my friends, and my friends are using different kinds of apps. In order to, if I have 3 friends using 3 different apps, that means that I have to download 3 apps in order to transact with 3 of my friends, right? But that would not be inconvenient, but it's happened in many countries with our digital infrastructure on payment, right? And after that, all these apps gonna try to help their user by connecting their system together to facilitate this kind of connection without requiring all the user to download every app. But if you have many participants, many apps in the ecosystem, that means that you're gonna have to connect all the system together. It's gonna be a big web. It's gonna be an n times n square projects, IT projects to connect every app together. Just like what I show on the screen. And I actually intentionally left out one of the connection, which is not easy to notice. But in reality, if the ecosystem is developed this way, that means that you're going to tell your user that if you are using this app, you cannot connect to that app, but this app, except that app, include that app, but not that one. You know what I mean? So it's going to be a mess. Just telling your user what can work together. And imagine if we don't have prompt pay, we don't have that kind of infrastructure in Thailand. I have to ask my friend which bank you are using. I'm looking whether my bank is connected to your bank or not, or is otherwise. Then do you have other banks app as well, so I can connect to you? It's gonna be a mess. Okay, so if we let our country develop without digital infrastructure in this way, it's gonna take years. I don't know how many years to connect everything together. And I'm sure that Thailand would not be transformed into a cashless society as we have been today if we go that route. So the digital infrastructure, I'll always give an analogy to having a superhighway that cut across the country, that connects all the small cities together. The cities being the participants, the apps within the ecosystems. And by having this superhighway that cuts through the whole country, each participant, each city in the country only built one on-off ramp onto the infrastructure. That's all they need to do, just one project to connect, just one link to the main road, to the superhighway, and then all the city will be connected together. I want to emphasize this because this should be the idea of anyone or any country, anywhere, and in the main principle that we have to use when we talk about digital infrastructure. It is not an app. It is a system, a standard that glue, that connect every participant, every system in the ecosystem so that it enable transaction that go across, enable all the participants to work together to deliver the good and service to the consumer. And at the same time, I want to emphasize here also that the infrastructure itself usually don't have customer-facing channel. It's up to the participant itself to provide the customer-facing application. Let's think it this way. If we don't have prompt pay, and the Thai government decided, a few years ago that, hey, we don't have this infrastructure, we're gonna build a government app, a single app, where everybody in Thailand have to download this in order to conduct all their financial activities. A single app, a super app, government wallet that everybody has to use. What happened? Then it will destroy all the future innovation in Thailand, because you have to wait for that government body to improve that app, to come up with a new version, to innovate. But if instead of doing that, we build the infrastructure without any customer-facing front and let the participant, in this case the banks and non-banks, develop their own apps and connect to the infrastructure so that they can compete, they can innovate to bring the best experience, use the best technology, and compete in terms of marketing and cost and efficiency to deliver the best service at the cheapest cost to Thai consumer. So that's I want to conclude here that what we mean always by building a digital infrastructure is a structure that connects participants in the ecosystem so that it enables transaction with the most efficiency and allow innovation and competition. Okay, and this should be the key to any design or development of digital infrastructure. And it should be this same concept that a digital ID infrastructure should be designed and built. Okay. And in Thailand, during the last years of the previous government, the private sector and public sector came together, set up a company, set up as a committee, and later on a company to build the infrastructure, digital ID infrastructure for Thailand under the name of NDID. And with the exact principle of design, as I explained earlier, to be an infrastructure rather than an app. And NDID allows participants in many roles, which we usually call relying party, identity provider, and authoritative source, and enable them to conduct a transaction, even a complex transaction that involve many parties to deliver the service to consumer. And as you can see from this simple chart, that is not limited to just some kind of transactions. Not only financial, not only health, it can be any kind of transaction that connects onto this superhighway and enable the new kind of digital service to Thai consumer. And right now, up to this moment, NDID has been, I don't know how many years, a few years already, 4 years already. And many companies, many providers, banks, non-banks, as well as public sectors have already been connected onto this new infrastructure. And a lot of the services, which I show you later, has already been enabled, and many people are starting to use it. But before I go on, I would like to emphasize another key element of building a digital infrastructure. I mentioned about enabling part and efficiency part. To have the efficiency, there are two key concepts. First is to make into an open infrastructure where a lot of people come and compete. It's the same thing that we discussed earlier in the earlier session, that a payment system should allow banks and non-banks into the same infrastructure so that they compete. Because of competition, the market force itself is the only way that we can guarantee that there's no inefficiency left behind, because they're going to compete at lower cost to the consumer. And that's what you see in PromptPay, which bank competes until each transaction is free. And that's drive the growth of not only the usage, and because they try to improve the efficiency in themselves, so the bank becomes stronger and better, and they innovate, and it brings out even more new kind of service and expand the market even further. That's the market force in the working. But at the same time, you not only allow the competition, but you have to ensure also that there is only one infrastructure, not two, not three, not many infrastructure, because that's gonna destroy the principle of efficiency. Because if you think it in the macro level, counting the number of transactions in the country to n, I mean, you can only have this much number of transactions in the whole country, n. If you have a cost of running an infrastructure as C, total cost, then the transaction cost is basically C divided by n, right? But if some crazy people think that, okay, we should build another infrastructure on top of it, and then every party, every people in the ecosystem had to connect to every infrastructure, then it's not going to be C, it's be 2C, 3C, multiple times of C. So the more you build this unnecessarily overlapping, duplicate infrastructure, you're going to reduce the efficiency and increase the cost. So this is another principle that is very important. I have to say it here because right now, I mean, even as we speak, there's still a lot of attempts in Thailand to build duplicate infrastructure. Okay, because the reason that I have to come up on this stage and say all this because I want to really clear out all this misunderstanding that we should have competition at the participant level, not the infrastructure level. Okay, and I have to, and I want you to go back home and remember that infrastructure is not an app. Because every time, I mean, from time to time, I'll see a government agency, a government department come up with a new, quote unquote, infrastructure, digital ID infrastructure project again. Some of them would be a duplication of digital infrastructure, but most of them would end up being just a project of an app, building an app. And you should understand by now that an app is not an infrastructure. Otherwise, I'm going to have every Thai citizen have to download so many apps of every ministry to do everything, right? And I used to joke that it's just like in the movie Lord of the Ring, but now we have Lord of the Apps, and trying to find an apps of power, an app to rule them all, a super app to rule all the apps, with a huge budget to rule all the apps, and that's what happened in many government agencies, and but luckily, NDID has already been running. It has already been proven that it can handle many kinds of use cases in many sectors. Right now, and along the process, I have to tell that we have developed a lot of standards, and we push the standards so that the KYC process uplift the information that we know about the user into a more I don't want to go into technical detail, but this is what they call IAL 2.3. Right now, 35 million users in Thailand. This is more than half of the people in Thailand are already enabled to use digital ID. And currently, each month, there are millions of transactions of people doing all kinds of transactions ranging from opening account or accessing their credit bureau or even access to their account at the revenue department, there are millions of transactions already. A lot of Thai people have already been using it without knowing that that is what we call digital ID. Okay, it's already there. Okay, and many, as you can see, there are many kinds of transactions, many kinds of new services that are being enabled, and the roadmap still line up with a lot of new kind of services that's going to bring onto the ecosystem. It can only happen if we have a good infrastructure without any duplications. And you can imagine if we don't have this kind of infrastructure, then anyone who wants to use a digital ID have to go around the country talking to every participant in the ecosystem and connect that system to. It's not going to work. Okay. That's another angle which I think is a key development step, which is also a challenge to the country going forward, is the extension of the usage of digital ID from individual citizen user ID into the one that we can apply it for business, for foreigner, for juristic persons. Okay. That's the next step. That's the next challenge. With maybe later on, people in the panel gonna discuss about this. Okay. I would like to conclude this presentation with just the last message. We have been quite successful in building digital infrastructure for payment. And one of the key reasons is because we have the Bank of Thailand. Okay. I have to say that because they invite me to talk on this stage too. So, but that's a joke. But this is the truth that we have the Bank of Thailand, who is the authoritative body that can command the respect and cooperation of the participant in the ecosystem of payment system, mainly the banks. Because building a digital infrastructure is a huge endeavor. And at the same time, you have to overcome a lot of obstacles, mostly from different needs and sometimes conflicting needs of people in the ecosystem. The bank, individually, they don't want to cooperate with each other because they are competing. But they have to cooperate to build a system without the middleman, like the Bank of Thailand, who has the authority to demand something, to conclude something, to say, hey, this is what it is, this is not what we want. Without that central body, it's not going to happen. But for digital ID infrastructure, is even a bigger challenge. Because now it cuts across every industry. Private sector, public sector, likewise, all the ministries. Then the question is, who is going to be this middle authoritative body to push through, to make sure that everybody follow, obey, and go together to build a single ecosystem for digital ID. That's the biggest challenge. Okay, I don't have the question yet, the answer yet, because I'm also not the Prime Minister. And even if I'm not Prime Minister, I'm not sure whether the Prime Minister can command all the fragmented, all the factions within the government that looks over different ministries. So that's a challenge, okay, which I don't have the answer right now. I'm going to leave it to the next panelists to discuss some of this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much once again, Dr. Anushita Nukun, for an insightful overview of digital identity and its evolution. On to our last session at the main conference today. Not only that we have had an insightful keynote speeches on the digital identity, but we also have a panel of experts on digital identity to deep dive into the developments and adoption of digital identity for both individual levels and business level that serves as fundamental for the digital economy. For the panel on business in the digital world, the evolution of digital identity, please give a warm welcome to the Director of Enterprise Risk Management Department at the Bank of Thailand, Ms. Wichit Lekha Marom.
Thank you, Dempsey. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the very last but not least session of today's main conference. I'm truly honored to be moderating this session, and it's my pleasure to have our distinguished four gentlemen here on the stage. So, for a whole day, we've heard about the digital finance products and services along with the electronic payment systems, but all of these will not be happening at all if you don't have the first and foremost important thing, which is your own identity in the digital world. Okay, so including the previous session, the keynote addressed how the infrastructure should look like, right? So, and the benefits of having and the drawbacks of not having the collaborative platform for the digital identity as an infrastructure. So today, in the session, we'll talk about the evolution of the digital identity, and then we get the viewpoints from the key stakeholders and insights of use cases, not only the individual identity, digital identity, but also the extension of using the digital identity for businesses. That's going to be a really insightful information and discussion because there are a lot of projects going on about the corporate digital identity, which we'll share on the stage here today. So last but not least here, we'll hear about the hands-on experiences from the real implementation and what makes those projects successful. All right, so we have the four distinguished gentlemen here with me today. From the service provider supply side, so we have the founder and CEO from SureCert, which is the digital identity and background checking platform from the UK. Please join me to welcome Mr. Ian Savage. So not only the service provider we also have the key stakeholders who are involved in the outstanding digital identity implementation, starting from the public sector. And we have one of the biggest public hospitals in Thailand adopting the e-documents with digital signature and remote signing. We have a great honor from the Dean of the Faculty of Medicine, Sirirat Hospital, Mahidol University. Please join me to welcome Professor Apichat Asawamongkol-Kun. And one of the key players in Thailand's digital ID system in the role of trusted source, we have the CEO from the one and only credit bureau in Thailand, NCB. Please welcome Mr. Surapon Odpatsathien. And last but not least, here we have a regulator. Well, we are in the same boats because the Bank of Thailand is also playing a regulator role. And we have the executive director from the Electronic Transactions Development Agency, or EDTA, who is the policymaker and also the regulator of the digital identity services in Thailand. Please welcome Dr. Chaichana Mitpan. Okay, first of all, thank you so much once again for being here with us this year on the stage of the Bank of Thailand, and I'm truly honored to be moderating the session. Let's get started with Ian here to show us the big picture, do the environmental scan of the current development of the digital identity, especially in the global perspective, like in the UK. Back to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me today and being back in Thailand. It's been far too long. Firstly, just by way of introduction, we've just recently been commissioned by the British Embassy in Thailand to help support where we can the further adoption of digital identity. So thank you again to the British Embassy. I mean, briefly, who am I? Just before I go into the global, so I run a digital identity providing company in the United Kingdom based in Northern Ireland, and we've been running Northern Ireland government's full citizens identity verification process for the last 12 months, largely developed because of the COVID vaccine passport requirement, needed a digital identity tool, but it's also now a reusable identity right across government. I think the big thing from a global perspective, there are an awful lot of developments in some places actually where you wouldn't necessarily expect them. I'll give you an example of Rwanda, for example, which is now really quite heavily advanced, and RegTech Africa is very much about developing a comprehensive view on what identity does across government, particularly on government citizen identity, assisted very much by the World Bank. And then you have different pockets of development. I mean, I think we're probably all pretty familiar with Singapore, which is obviously very, very highly advanced, and everybody's cultural needs and government needs and indeed financial sector needs are very different across those different areas. But there are pockets, for example, in Commonwealth countries, for example, New Zealand and Canada, the UK, and then with non-Commonwealth countries such as Israel and Denmark would be getting together to try and standardize a lot of these similar approaches. I mean, to give you an idea of what happened in the UK and what digital identity means in the UK, the system we have essentially has a number of different elements. I'm not sure if we have the slide, or maybe we'll go back to the slide.
Yeah, we have one of the slides here.
I'll just keep going as we get the slide. So, I mean, I was very interested to listen to NDID, and we're talking to NDID in more detail tomorrow, but essentially the UK government standard across digital identity has a number of key elements. So the first one would be, does the identity exist? So we don't have an NDID equivalent, but what we do have would be 3 different credit check providers, and that involves, thank you. We personally use Experian for that, where it goes through a broad range of publicly available and bank available data to confirm the name, address, and date of birth is what the individual says it is. And that also flags up some red flag identity checks as well. It could be anything from bank, telco data, electoral roll. So there are some public elements in that as well. But we go into red flag data, such as it would flag up a known fraudulent identity. It could be PEPs and sanctions or global sanctions checks as well. And we do things like mortality data. So to give you an example, there are actually 3 types of dead people in the UK. Only one that would come from a trusted government source. We had around 80 dead people apply for digital identity checks in the last 12 months, which we found very interesting. So once we've done that identity check, we then do an identity document check. Largely, this is a largely commoditized process now. We essentially confirm that the passport or driving license, or in some cases citizen identity card, is valid and is not fraudulent, using a range of artificial intelligence approaches. We then do a selfie check, not from a government database selfie, but from a photograph provided by the citizen. And then once that's compared, we then do the full data comparison check, which confirms that individual, it's essentially a triangulation of data to make sure that that individual is who they say they are, and that the identity information is available.
That's really interesting. I think it looks similar to what Dr. Anushit has mentioned about the NDID platform, which is the common infrastructure connecting the involved party together, and this to do the cross-checking of the data if the validity and authenticity, right? So let's get back to what Thailand is doing here. Listen from the policymaker and the regulator, and as we are leading forward to the digital economy. So what is your policy or the strategic direction that the EDTA is formulating to foster the digital identity in Thailand?
Thank you. We are a new regulator, and we are trying to study, what have been done and what we are trying to do. And digital ID is one of the space that many industries and government transactions will be based on. And we have been working on this since 5 years ago with many stakeholders.
Including the Bank of Thailand.
Oh yes, of course. The central bank is one of the major stakeholders. who's helped shape what we have today. So there's been the need for digital IDs 5 years ago on the private sector based on the KYC requirements, in particular for the banks. But at the same time, the government started to computerize, trying to transform. So the government had a policy, a digital economy policy, which tried to force government agency to transform and use more of the technology to provide the services to the Thai citizens. So at least there are two needs that leads to the development of the digital ID, and so many initiatives has happened, including the setting up of NDID.
Right.
Yes. The government has been, thinking of being a slow mover. We are never fast enough for the business world. That's why NDID happened first, to serve the business entities, while the government is developing.
Well, slower is better than never.
We hope so. The government has been, on the principle of trying to be deliberate and try to think of all the perspective and try to make sure that we are going in the right direction. And recently, we have been trying to talk to many different stakeholders, including government agencies and private entities, in order to try to come up with a framework which will go for the next 2 years. And we came up with the 8 strategic thrusts to drive in the next 2 years, which has been agreed upon with many stakeholders, both government side and also private side. Let's see, the first one is digital identity for individuals, juristic persons, and foreigners has to be enabled to enhance electronic transactions. So that means we try to cover at least, these 3 groups: individuals, Thai individuals, juristic peoples, and foreigners, so that we try to incorporate everybody into the digital world. The second is citizens can choose appropriate digital identity to access online services. The meaning of appropriate identity that has to be decided by the service providers, because service providers has to make sure that they provide the service to authorized person or the person that they want to provide the service to. It's not only on the citizen side to select the identity that they have. So that has to be agreed upon. So these 2 strategies is considered to be the inclusion principle given by the World Bank to promote the digital ID. They have given 3.
Sorry, is one of the first 2 things that you start doing, right? Because there are 8 cores, so you start with the first 2?
Right.
Okay.
Then the next group is the design. We want to make sure that our strategy is embracing all the stakeholders and make sure that they have a good design principles. So the third one is the Ministry of Interior is the main authority which provides information and services to support identity verification of Thais and foreigners residing in Thailand, because they have the data of all the Thai citizens, and also the data of foreigners who live in Thailand longer than 6 months. So they will provide information and services to the entities require the authentication of the persons. The fourth one is the Department of Business Development is the main authority which provides information related to juristic person to support its use of digital identity in conducting transactions, because DBD is the registrar of the business entity in Thailand. So they have the trusted source for business entity in Thailand. The fifth strategy is juristic person conducts transactions using digital identity of the authorized individuals of the juristic person. So juristic person consists of individuals in the company. And by way of doing it now, a person can be authorized by the juristic person to conduct transactions on behalf of the juristic person. So we adopt that into the digital world as well, so that the power of attorney becomes important, and we will talk about that in a bit later.
Okay.
The sixth one is citizens can access public service using trusted digital identity without identity re-verification. So that's the attempt to reduce the number of digital cards in your wallet. So the best, maybe a person may say that I want to have only one card or one ID. But business requirements or environment or context may require a person to have more than one ID. For example, driver's license or cards for receiving government benefits. They may require some attribute of the user to be on the ID cards themselves. So this group of four strategies grouped into the design principle that's recommended by the World Bank. The seventh is on the governance side. So EDTA will drive overall digital ID policies and develop common standards which sectoral regulators may apply to their sectors. So EDTA, by law, is the entity that provides the support to the Electronic Transactions Commission to regulate the digital ID services. So we will recommend policy and make sure that we have appropriate standards to make sure that digital identity is interoperable and provide what Dr. Nishida said, the superhighway for different parties to work on. And the eighth one is Digital Government Agency, or DGA, develops public sector digital identity standards to ensure cross-compatibility and interoperability between public and private sectors. That's to make sure that on the government side, there's also a good governance on the interoperability of digital ID and make sure that the use is trustworthy.
Yeah, that's really interesting how the regulators actually go with a framework. We do that as well. This is only the first phase, right? And there are already 8 cores. So how long are you expecting this to get something done?
Yeah, that's bringing us the laughter.
Okay, we'll get back to you later on the probably adoption or implementation. Right. We hear from the service provider and also the regulator, then we'll see the real experiences on the implementation. We have Professor Doctor here to share with us the initiatives that they have, use the electronic documents with the electronic signature and remote signing. What was your first thoughts when you start using these digital solution, and what's your secret sauce actually to make it successful? Professor?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. May I have my slide, please? So, Cedar Hospital is the largest public hospital in our nation and also in our ASEAN country. And you might have same experience as the government side. Everything that we would like to do, like a procurement process for the liquidation or order, we have a lot of documentation, a lot of papers. And many times come with the wrong, something like a wrong number is not right. We need to send it back. And this will be, sometimes maybe more than 2 or 3 times that the waste timing and waste the chance that we can, do it in the right way to have something like a medicine or equipment is ready for our patients. And this is a pain in the neck. And also it's costly every time. And the process is quite long. So I think that after we have the signature for 3 weeks, because the process begins before.
Just for one person?
Yeah, because I'm the first dean who used this signature. Because of the past dean, Professor Plus is going to be the first one to begin, but just beginning in the October the 1st. And I think that from my experience, it's very, very comfortable because of I can access in everywhere. I can approve from my home, from my car, because of this is the real good thing that you can access from anywhere. I think this is the first important. The second thing that we can reduce the timeline from average of about 26 days to be 4 days. I think that this for the benefits is going to be to our patients because we can reduce the timeline. And I think that this whole process cannot happen if we don't have the support from every sector, not only our side, not only the vendor side, but especially for the government side. And it's really so lucky because we have the support from the vendors. We choose the DKNSH and the Zurich Pharma, also SCG, because they give the volume of the contract in our business per year. And the main issue that every time we're gonna asking about how can we retrieve the right data and how can we make sure. So I think that our gentleman just confirmed because of the safety and the security that the government side put in the infrastructure. So I think that we believe to this system. And I think that after my first impression, the first one, the way that I need to identify myself, that take a little bit longer time, like we have experience already. But after that, we need not to use that because of the KY. We use the signing certificate and also using LTP, personal identity. It's no problem in my 3 weeks. I mean, that the position. So I think that the key success, because of we have all the support from the every kind of sectors and also all the stakeholders to make this process happen. And I still believe that this is going to be helpful for my procurement system and hope that we can share more after this next section. Okay.
Thank you so much, Professor. So it's so obvious that the digital solutions offer you the better efficiency and also decrease the cost, and definitely all the benefits go to the people, the patients that he mentioned about. So not only the public sector, in financial sector, as we're within the Central Bank of Thailand here, we've done a lot in the digital identity development. So for the one and only NCB Credit Bureau here, as one of the key stakeholders who helped building up the platform, so-called NDID as well. So any views on you helping on this and what kind of data they're flowing, what you're seeing, and what the benefits that the people can get from that?
Credit Bureau in Thailand, we have like the 125 member is to provide the service to call the credit information, provide for them to the loan process. I show you the slide is on my handwriting, right?
This is really unique.
Yeah, handwriting, because I am an accountant. I study accountant and study Master of Law, but this is the digital, okay?
All right.
It's very easy for the customer when we enhance to the digital ID. The customer is go to like the digital touch point, mobile, web, or anywhere, right? The RP, we provide the digital touch point. The law is said that before the credit bureau, we disclose the information to the financial institute, is need to KYC the customer. This is the law is request. How we know that who you say you are? Either I'm a Surapo, but you are Surapo, real Surapo or not? Who you say you are? The three key things that to ensure that Surapo is something you have, something you know, something you are, right? With the technology, for example, is a facial recognition, with the OCR, everything, build it in the solution. The NDID platform will helping the eKYC in the cyberspace is reality. We no need the paper is go from this table to this table, right? After that, if we know that Surapo is Surapo, Mr. A is Mr. A, under the legal condition, strictly the legal condition. After that, the e-consent and the e-signature we create. From the e-consent create, the e-request will go to the NCB. The NCB will return. We not return the information through the NDID because we know about like PDPA is condition. We decide that we get the token to the member. The member is get our token to their system to inquiry the information. We have the link point to point with the member 125, and we return the information to the member within 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3 return after their request. You know that in Thailand last year 120 million transaction a year.
Requesting your credit information?
Yeah,
120 million transactions.
Yep. And from this picture, we design based on like the PDPA, Electronic Transaction Act. Right. The last Amendment Act is talking about like the digital ID, okay? Credit Bureau Business Act and Market Conduct from the Bank of Thailand. The serious issue is in place. Next slide, please. Next slide.
And where are you from that picture? Sorry, can you get back again? Where are you in the picture?
NCB as an AS in the NDID.
Yes.
NCB is an AS in NDID, right? The customer is identification to the RP, right? The RP verification the customer. The IP is authenticate the people. After that, the AS is disclose the information.
Right. So AS is the authoritative source,
right?
Or the trusted source.
Yeah. The next slide we show you a little bit about like the example that we get the information. Every consent, when we delete the privacy and we using the statistic, we will know about like the behavior of the customer who signed the consent when they apply the loan. Within the information you will see that the consent owner is the generation X, Y, or Z, or baby boomer, right? What time that they're using the digital touch point to request the loan? What product that they're using? And this is to measure that application of the bank A is better of the bank B or not. Who is the target customer? What is the behavior of the customer? It's very easy. This is a little bit example that we get the information from the consent. And you know that the consent is, 1 million of the consent is come to every time. And we're using the information on this is to build it and return to the member, is to enhance their service to serve the customer. This is all that Credit Bureau is done it today.
This is really impressive because the first and foremost thing that you need to do is to make sure that the person is the person he's saying he is.
Yes.
Right? In order to disclose the information. Otherwise, that's the
we cannot to disclose to missed person, because if we send the information is missed person, I will come to jail 5 years.
So we can.
The law said. Yeah.
So we're certain that whatever the NCB is doing is probably the safe and sound.
Yep.
Processes, solutions to make sure that he's not going to get in trouble.
Hope so.
All right, so let's go back to the agenda here that we're talking about, the evolution of the digital identity and what businesses can take the most benefits of it. So let's talk about the new opportunities, the extension from the individual digital identity to business, to facilitate the ease of doing businesses for the corporates and companies. So I'd like to ask the ETDA about, probably he can illustrate how corporate digital ID work, and also what the national agenda that you have with this corporate digital identity?
Great. We are now looking at the application on the business side. The identity of business is very important when a corporate would like to conduct the transactions, maybe entering into a contract, the corporate has to provide a lot of information for identifying which businesses, which registration number you have with the DBD and all different types of paperwork. And we try to enable the digital transformation for that. So recently we have published a recommendation for delegation of authority resulting in the electronic power of attorney, so that individuals with digital ID can transact on behalf of business where he has the delegation of authority from. And under this recommendation, we provide format for electronic message, which covers document details, authorization information, and signature, which cover both general signature or digital signature. So this can be very, very flexible to use and allow many types of technologies to use under this recommendation. The authorization information would cover just like normal paper-based power of attorney, such as the delegator identity, delegatee identity, or it even support sub-delegation, or maybe in Thai การมอบอำนาจช่วงไป
Next step, right?
Right. And the validity period of the delegation and different conditions and where to verify this information. So that's the substance in the message. The second part is electronic signature and e-seal. E-seal, in Thailand, we allow a company to use seal, or in Thai is ตราประทับ.
Yeah, that's quite a big challenge.
Right. And actually, the law allow the seal to be used electronically, but we haven't seen much of it so far. Maybe.
How does it look like? After the electronic seal?
Well, it can be anything, actually anything, but we recommend for the trustworthiness of the seal. It can be in the form of digital certificate.
Okay. Similar to what the individual ones are applying.
Right. So this recommendation accommodate different types of e-signature and electronic seal of the corporate. It's in order to use this recommendation, there may be several systems involved, but we may not need all of them. For example, certificate issuing systems, which we have a few today, such as TDID or Internet Thailand. These are two certification authority that is under the trust framework at the national level, because they are certified with a web trust operation scheme. So that's the first type of system. This system allows a digital signature to be verified with trust with a third-party service. The second system that we may use is identity management system. If NDID, which is a platform that connects different IDPs together, this may consider a identity management system which can help identify who the person is, that are either delegator or delegatee. Information management system is a system that provides support for the whole process. For example, the system may be used for document validation to make sure that the document is not a counterfeit, or the document exists at a certain period in time. The fourth one is just the person information system, which I think is under the authority of the DBD, Department of Business Development, which I think the central bank and also EDA and many organizations have been talking to the DBD so that this information system can be used for the purpose of corporate digital ID, and is still ongoing, the discussion how that can be used. The fifth one is e-timestamp duty system, which support the, in Thai is argon stamp, which required to be put on certain types of document. Now it can be put on electronically. That is announced by the Department of Revenue. You can go and look at the website to see what kind of duty stamp can be conducted electronically. The sixth one is a time reference system. We want to make sure that, in particular, the validity period, how can that be verified? What is a time reference? Now we have e-time stamping system. We have the time reference system run by different authority in Thailand that can be used.
I have curious that e-seal is have a power. It's just like the seal that today in the physical, right? Oh. In feng shui, some company is a feng shui.
What?
Feng shui. Feng shui. E-seal is power, spirit. So it's just like the physical seal.
Yes.
I think it's number 7.
Number 7.
Should be, but at least it's legally binding.
Yes,
right?
Thank you. I'll add that in my slide.
Yeah, this is really interesting because just trying to set up the recommendation and framework and basically to standardize it and to make sure that, even there are a lot of solutions, but they should be able to talk to each other.
Right.
Upon these standards and the formats.
Right.
Very cool.
It's a recommendation so that people can start moving forward, and if people see problems with using the recommendation, they can feedback, and we can update them.
Okay, so probably good start for Thailand, and then we'll see what the adoption is going forward in the future upon this recommendation. So back to you, Ian. What's your view on this for the future looking of the adoption from the retail segment to wholesale of the digital identity that you're seeing?
I think it's probably two things in the UK in particular. One is the framework that has been developed legislatively for this adoption or stronger adoption of digital identity. And the UK government has put together a digital identity and attributes framework which essentially simplifies and standardizes the approach. And then we as identity providers will get validated onto that particular framework. So that then opens up a lot of different opportunities, not just in retail, but to give you an example, 2 legislative areas. One is the right to work in the UK, and then the right to rent, actually rent property in the UK is now part of that framework. So you can use a digital identity tool to do the right to work and right to rent approaches, but there are a whole range of different approaches that are applications for that once you've actually got that framework in place. And that's still very much in the early stages, and across the world it's similar. So I know that New Zealand are going through a similar attributes and trust framework to enable then broader adoption beyond government. I think it's just interesting to say that the UK government had developed this really also as a market to formalise digital identity as a way of being an economic driver as well, from a tech companies to grow. But then on the other side, they then created a one login for government approach, which is almost contrasting with that particular framework. So it's still just being, we're not doing everything best practice in the UK, and it's a little bit conflicting at the minute to see how that would work. But the framework is very much designed to really get everybody to start using this particular tool. But I mean, to give you an example, I'm selling a house in Northern Ireland where I live at the minute, and I had to drive an hour to a solicitor last week to give my identity information to them directly, so which was ironic given my company. So we're still very much behind, but I think the legal area would be a very big area as well.
Yeah, as Dr. Cheshana mentioned about the government bodies in Thailand, which is the Department of Business Development, who has a registrar for businesses. And there are also some opportunities and challenges from accessing, those kind of registration information. How about in the UK? Are you facing similar challenges or any opportunities that we'd like to share?
I think the big opportunity is definitely on the very politicized area of right to work and right to rent. So I think the frameworks that are being there to sort of to tighten up the way in which people could get into the country or the way in which people work or rent in the country. So, I mean, that's a big thing. I mean, we because I work in an identity environment, I think everybody's so far ahead, because we are always talking about technology.
Yeah.
But there's an awful lot of opportunities. I mean, I work with a particular Danish bank, for example, that does all of the know your customer still manually. And I think there's an irony. They think that by doing it manually, the regulator would be happier. So I think there's a better steer potentially from the regulator to be in a driver of digital adoption, I think would be a key thing within the UK.
Yeah, it's great to hear about the adoption because actually we're talking about the scalability and we want to push up the adoption of the digital identity as well. So personally, I think use cases are very important. Doesn't matter what solutions you're using, what technology you're using, or what stakeholders are involved. But if that's the use case that can be driven by the market, that will work, definitely.
But I think part of the use case is really interesting in digital government because there's no point in getting access to government services if then the next stage isn't digitized. So, we call it a single point of truth for digital identity, which Estonia did, that if you can do that first, then everything flows from that as you start to transform government services as well.
What was the use case? What actually are use cases the UK government has started with?
Usually, for example, in driving license update, criminal record confirmation, things, mundane elements like booking a test for your car every year, those sorts of things. But the big one actually that we're working with at the minute is in the health sector within Northern Ireland, where there's a new electronic health and care record coming in. And that's a good example of digital transformation because it's turning that health record on its head and providing patient portal to enable patients to manage their own health information and to essentially take more control of their own health. And our digital identity tool has been really the first stage of doing that because it's a reusable identity tool for government for anybody who wants to use it. Unfortunately for us, because we only get to do it once, but it's good for government.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you address about the reusable digital identity. So I would like to back to the NCB here, that you've seen a lot of data, you've seen a lot of flows coming in. What are your views on the potential use cases, probably on the corporate digital identity here?
We have the customer in terms of the company in our database is more than 400,000 company.
Okay, probably most updated.
Yeah.
Then the DPD.
And have a million inquiry transaction per day, every day, right?
All right.
You can imagine that this one company is apply for the 7 bank for the soft loan or something like that. They will get the huge amount of the paper, go to this bank, and sign off, right? This is terrible, right? And if they can go to this way, it's very easy. Back to the basic is who you say you are. Is this company is this company. This director is this director, and he or she have the real power to sign. Everything is exactly one source of truth, and sign off, and the legal is binding, and everything is go on. Non-face to face, no paper, save the tree. Everything is
Go green,
yeah.
Sustainability, all those keywords that we've been hearing.
Yeah.
For a whole day.
We hope that the regulator will be play like the key role to push in this, because we have the success story in terms of the consumer, right? The people, but now we need for the company, either like the smaller company, SME or something like that. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And so not only in the private sector, But I'd like to get back to the public sector, which is personally I think is really inspiring. Because a lot of public entities are quite intimidating to using probably having the digital transformation. But Sirirat has proved that it could happen and it could happen the big time. So probably Professor Pichat can share more experiences on using the components of the digital identity, not only the identity itself, right? Because you mentioned about the electronic documents, the electronic signature. What's your next plan from this to support the Sirirat's smart hospital vision?
Yeah, before going that, as the dean who is the final who put the D signature, I'm so happy because right now we don't have any paper on my desk, only one page. Then after I run through the D signature, just tick my signature, only one. That means we need not to keep the documentation. We need not to use the storage to keep the papers, and also we don't waste all the expense for that documentation. And finally, we can save the world because we can save the trees, and this is the most important for our hospital that would like to have the clean campus. But anyway, I think we still have some room for improve. If we would like to all the government sectors to accept our signature, I think we need to find the standard platform. And also that we don't have any question about the KYC technology because Dr. Nuchit talked to us already. We confirm all that, no problem. And the good version control, that may be the regulator side, will give to us. And as the medical institute of the nation, we are not only the service to the patient, but we are the medical education. We teach our doctors and also the alliance to go and work for our patients to all over the country. And we also do the research and give the excellent service. So I think that if you would like to be smart, that means electronic any kind should be the major projects to our hospital. So I would like to expand not only the procurement, but I would like to go to the e-education, e-research, and e-hospital, especially like electronic consent form. I think we can expand for that. And we are very happy to be the pilot for the government sector, and we are open our house to anyone who would like to come to see our hospital. We are happy to share to them, and we would like to learn from them too. This is my experience about using the signature at Sila Hospital.
Thank you so much, and we certainly hope that all the public entities will, follow up your digital footprints here. Okay, so speaking of the digital identity ecosystem, we all realize that the importance and the systems should be safe and sound because it actually has our personal data there, and to make sure that the security, data privacy, you can name for more, or consumer protections are preserved. So that's why this kind of digital identity service providers needs to be regulated. So back to you, Ian. Probably have the picture of what's going on in the regulatory framework or the risk management on the service providers.
I mean, certainly I've mentioned obviously the identity and trust framework that's come into play. I think that some of the other elements within the UK framework would include, we were talking about this over lunch actually, the ICO, the Information and Communication Authority, which would look at the way in which data is used, the way in which it's applied, it's stored, retained, and broadening all of that is I'm going to now not remember what it stands for, but GDPR, so Global Data Protection Requirements, which is something that the UK has retained despite leaving the EU in the last couple of years. So that's something very much about the right to be forgotten, the right to have some kind of...
We also have it here. We have the PDPA already in place, effective.
Yeah, it's funny because actually it was something that we were actually very concerned about because it's something you don't want to get on the wrong side. But what we found in this particular project is we're working with the ICO very, very carefully on saying, look, there's data that's really usable and relevant, and how that's stored then is all very much as part of the consent mechanism.
Thank you. So probably back to you for the very last question about the regulatory framework and risk management. And we know that the decree has passed for the digital identity service providers control. So can you please update us what's going on and actually what the providers should get prepared?
Yes. We have a regulatory scheme for that digital ID service providers. If they would like to operate for Thai users, they have to be licensed. And we proposed the royal decree. The slide is putting, okay.
Yeah, it's up.
Okay, royal decree on the regulating digital ID services. Now it's at the stage where it's being proposed to the king to design and then announced in the Royal Gazette. But under that royal decree, there will be the subordinate laws, notification, announcement. We are working on it. But the principle is similar to what Ian has just said. It's risk-based. We look at different risks like identity theft, the fake of digital ID information, or the availability of the exchange platform. When a person needs to be authenticated, but the platform is not working, so that presents problems to the business users. So these are different types of risks that we try to address. And we look at different frameworks like ISO 27001 with the recent update, which covers many aspects of governance, including the infrastructure governance issued by the US, like identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. These are different aspects that we are looking at.
Thank you so much. So I'm sorry that we're running out of time. I would like you to give at least 1 minute as a key takeaway for the audience. Probably I'll start over to you.
Thank you. Just I suppose one of the key messages is about inclusivity on digital identity, and I think I just wanted to sort of finish this for my talk on this. So within the Northern Ireland context, we would pass around 80% of the identity checks, but 20% of them fall into this manual process. And typically those 20% are people who don't have core documents or aren't able to access the banking system for whatever reason. So we have this thing we call last mile for identity, and it essentially automates all the other documents that you would maybe rely on, be that bank statement, birth certificate, using artificial intelligence and using anomaly detection algorithms. So that to me is the key takeaway. You can get 80% of people through, but actually the cost of doing the 20% manually is perhaps 10 times as much. So that's really the message that I'd like to convey around inclusivity.
Yeah, cost is actually the key word as well for all industries. Professor?
Yes, a lot. We give the service for the patient more than 10,000 per day, or 4.5 million visits. I think that this signature should be cost effective to make our hospital can have enough good and right drugs and equipment for our Thai patients. And also, I think for the time frame that we are shorting, like I told you, that from 26 days to be 4 days, it should be enhance the ecosystem for our economy in Thai. And also that we hope that in the near future, we should have more information, our experience to confirm that the signature to be good for our business. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Last slide, please. I think in the today we are still in the unknown. We are we work on the situation is unknown. To develop about the financial service on the digital service is we need the unlimited creativity. As the Mr. Governor is said, is a responsible creativity, right? But we hope we have to solve the two problems. One is the frontier of the development today is limited by the ability of the regulator. Not more than this.
Who's
right?
that?
Who's that? Bank of Thailand? Yeah.
I'm not taking
Sure, you are the one. Okay. Another one is law. lawyer. Anytime that we talk with the lawyer, that we just like we talk with the wall, right? Or we talk with the sea. And they will respond being that, oh, I used to do like this. It's mean like in Thai is ผมสะดวกแบบนี้ เอาแบบนี้นะ I think this is the two problem that we need. Okay, Mr. Governor said that about the less possible creativity. We need from the south, from the business side is we need reasonable regulator. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. So let's hear from the last regulator here. What's his last word of the panel?
Thank you for giving the last words. Well, I would like to say that digital ID is here and is now. Don't wait. If you don't know how to start, talk to one of us or all of us. I think we are happy to work with you. And like Kun Sarpon has said, don't let law be the boundary of your activities. Don't let the regulators be the boundary for your abilities or your creativity. And we have mechanisms like Sandbox. We have been working with central banks that allows different corporate users and also government agency to perform or conduct and experiment their business models, their technology under our sandboxes. So at least we try to be friendly regulator and not too strict regulator. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is so obvious.
Last point.
Last one.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we have the last session. That's why we can extend.
Anytime that regulator said the sandbox, this is like a black hole.
Just
anything come in, not come out. Mr. Governor, as I said this morning.
No, there are a lot of projects got out already. Thank you so much. It's so obvious that we all collaborate because this is the public and private partnership. We help build the infrastructure, we help build the standards and also the business rules that we need to mutually agree. We also innovate to build the platform and to extend from the individual digital identity to the business usages. And also we inspire. We can start from what we're ready for. We can think big and start small, but we can move fast. Thank you so much, all gentlemen. Please give a big round of applause.
Thank you once again to all the panelists. May I invite Dr. Anushit on the stage to take a picture with the panel, please. So that wraps up today's great session. So thank you all the panelists and also Dr. Anushit for the keynote speech for business in the digital world, the evolution of digital identity. For all of you that you are still here, the main stage is over, but the library stage is still running. So the session on an outlook on Thai and ASEAN fintech landscape is still ongoing. So please be invited to the library stage on the second floor. And also, the exhibition areas will continue until late evening. So if you haven't checked it out yet, please do so. Before we end today, though, we would love to hear from you for sure. Your feedback is invaluable to us. So you can simply scan the QR code shown here to take you to the survey, to the event, and provide us any feedbacks you may have. There you go. That's the QR code. Simply put up your phone and scan the QR, and then will take you to the survey. And please do provide us on the feedbacks, any comments you may have on the event so that we can improve. And thank you for having us, coming with us today. So for today, we have enjoyed great sessions on the future digital economy, payments, and digital identity prospects. So we hope you stick around on the library stage and the exhibition area and enjoy the rest of our event.
And also tomorrow, also very, very interesting and exciting as well. We touch upon the topics of digital assets, central bank digital currency, blockchain, and cybersecurity. There will also be announcement for the winner of CBDC Hackathon. So I hope to see you all tomorrow. Thank you so much for your great participation today. Have a safe trip back home. Thank you. สวัสดีค่ะ
สวัสดีครับ